I got in at approximately 11:16 a.m. and I made it at 11:33 here. So it was good, actually, because my stress at being late for the podcast outweighed my stress of actually being on the podcast.
Hello and welcome to the 538 Politics Podcast. My name is Jody Avergan. Thanks to Galen Druk for filling in last Monday while I was on vacation, but I am now back and happy to be here to have this conversation with a crew that we've never done this combination before. So Nate and Claire are both out today, but Micah Cohen is here.
Hello, everybody.
And joining us is 538 contributor Nathaniel Rakich. Hello, Nathaniel. Can we call you Nate just for continuity's sake, or do you want to go with Nathaniel?
No, definitely Nathaniel.
Okay.
We need to differentiate.
What if we called you Better Nate? Could we go with that?
Better Nathaniel works.
Oh, okay. Better Nathaniel. All the other Nathaniels out there. Watch out.
Nathaniel's inaugural appearance on the podcast.
Yeah, that's great. Welcome.
Hi. All my friends, when I started writing for the site, were like, yeah, when are you going to be on the podcast? So, hi, guys.
It's worth noting that most of what Micah does on this podcast is say, as Nathaniel is writing on the show, on the site coming up, and then he says something that you were going to say. So, now you're here to say it yourself.
I'm excited to scoop myself this time.
Somebody sent a note saying, stop scooping Nathaniel.
No, it's promotion.
I didn't put them up to it.
It's buzz building.
Exactly.
Yeah. So look, here's the plan for today. We kind of have like a nicely wonky show. We're going to talk about some studies and we're going to talk about some news. The news, of course, is that this past weekend, New York Representative Chris Collins announced or released a statement saying that he was suspending his re-election campaign after being charged with insider trading. We'll touch on that. We'll also talk about the fact that we don't have final results in the special elections in Ohio's 12th or in the Kansas Republican gubernatorial primary. Then we're also going to dig into some data on who the Democrats exactly are nominating. 538 analyzed Democratic candidates so far, and there are some really interesting trends emerging. But let's start with that election news. We have one indictment and two unresolved races. So let's first talk about Chris Collins. One of you want to take a crack very briefly on why Mr. Collins is suspending his campaign?
Sure. So Chris Collins, who's the Republican representative for New York's 27th Congressional District, was arrested the other day on alleged insider trading. So he's in trouble. This is a scandal that's been brewing for a while, but obviously when you get arrested and that gets splashed all over the front page of the national news, that's going to throw a wrench in your re-election plans.
That's based on some deep analysis of past election results. Getting arrested for insider trading is bad for your re-election process.
That's in the model. There's like one line of code.
Yeah, it's
if you're arrested.
There actually is a line in the code for scandal effects.
For deep scandal. Yeah. So, in terms of what comes next, Collins is out. Do Republicans now scramble and get someone on the ballot? Is this an open seat? I mean, what
this is kind of confusing, right?
Yeah, so...
Good. That's what we want on
Lots
this
to explain here. Like you said, a wonky show. So Collins announced last week that he was suspending his campaign, but it's unclear whether he can really do that because it's very hard to get off the ballot in New York State. So there are three reasons. So first, you could die. I don't think Collins wants to do that. He could become ineligible, like by moving out of state, or he could be a candidate for a different office, which would allow him to remove his name from the ballot for this office. But it's not that simple. Like a lot of people have talked about Collins, quote, moving out of state, like just making his D.C. area residence his official residence. But Democrats would most likely sue in that scenario. You actually had Tom DeLay, blast from the past, try this back in 2006 when he was in a scandal of his own. He tried to get off the ballot in Texas by switching his residence to Virginia, but Democrats sued and he actually lost that case, so he had to remain on the ballot, although Republicans eventually were able to wage a write-in campaign.
Just to state the obvious, Democrats would love for him to not be able to wiggle out of this, right?
Yeah, whether Collins is on the ballot will actually sort of determine whether this race is competitive or not. So this is a really Republican district. It has a GOP lean of like 22 points, something like that.
R plus 23, according to our new partisan lean figures.
He won his last election in 2016 by about 30 points.
Right,
so, yeah.
Right. And our measure of sort of a district or state's default political leanings, what we call partisan lean, puts it at R plus 23. So it's a red district, right? Now, the line in the code that looks at scandals that Nathaniel mentioned earlier is based on this work Nathaniel and Nate have done looking at past instances in which a candidate running for re-election has been, swamped with a scandal, right? And basically what they found is, the magnitude of the effect varies, but not surprisingly, it hurts you. And in more competitive districts, it can shave 12, 13 points off of your support, right? So if you start at this district as R plus 23, shave 12, 13 points off, you're down to like R plus 10. Well, the national environment is going to be Democratic leaning. Maybe it's like 7, 8 percentage points Democratic leaning. All of a sudden, you get pretty close to a competitive district. Now, Collins is an incumbent, which has some advantages. But still, it's like, a world in which Collins is on the ballot, Democrats are all of a sudden in striking distance, where if you just had a generic Republican running here, I don't think it's that competitive.
So we'll be watching how this plays out, and it would be remarkable if he stays on the ballot and only turns it into a toss-up, but we'll see. But Nathaniel, is there anything about the fact that he bowed out pretty quickly after getting arrested that says anything about the national environment right now, or is that pretty standard? Like, you get arrested, you're going to bow out of a race?
No, people will often try to fight it. I did think it was interesting that he initially said that he was going to stick it out and run for re-election, and then a few days later he said, oops, never mind, which, conveniently it takes a few days to conduct an internal poll, so maybe he was looking at his numbers and decided they didn't look so good. But I agree with Micah that Republicans are definitely hoping they can get somebody else on the ballot who would be less toxic. But that said, this person would have to start a campaign basically from scratch, and we're 12 weeks out from an election at this point. They would have to raise money from zero. They'd have to hire a campaign staff from zero. So that's not nothing. So they're still going to be in a disadvantage no matter what.
And probably a district that the larger GOP infrastructure wasn't thinking they'd need to be pouring resources into, and now they might have to scramble and do that, and maybe that'll take away from some other district. So we'll keep watching that. As I mentioned, there are still a couple unresolved races, so let's touch on those. Micah, the Ohio 12, you previewed it on last week's podcast, and then the election happened, and it's still ongoing. ...
Yeah, it's unresolved. The Republican Troy Balderson, I think, is up by like a little less than a percentage point, right? Mm-hmm. They're separated by 1,564 votes, with about 3,500 provisional ballots and 5,000 absentee ballots outstanding. So I think our view is that Balderson, the Republican, is going to hold on, right, Nathaniel?
Yeah, so I did some back-of-the-envelope math, and so first of all, I think it's important. I don't know if everybody knows, what provisional ballots are and what the deal is with the absentee ballots. So provisional ballots are basically you go to your polling place and for whatever reason something goes wrong. You're not on the official list of registered voters. Maybe you forgot your ID at home that day and you fill out a provisional ballot, which is often a different color, and it's set aside. Later on, they will decide whether you were indeed eligible to vote, and then they'll decide whether to count your vote at that point. So Micah mentioned the 3,435 provisional ballots. Not all of those will be counted. Usually maybe about 2/3 or 3/4 of them will. And also with the absentee ballots, we don't know how many of those are actually going to be returned versus how many were just sent out and maybe are still sitting on people's living room tables. So if we assume that 5,000 ballots are left to be counted, which is about 60% of the outstanding total, O'Connor would have to win 2/3 of them, 66%, in order for him to pull that out. That's pretty out of line with the overall numbers, but it could happen. Provisional ballots do tend to go toward Democrats, but I think certainly you'd rather be Balderson in this case.
When we talk about election results, primary results around here, we often look at the benchmarks, where does a district lean, and then we look at the results and see if there's a big swing towards Democrats or whatever. So do we kind of know everything on that front that we would know already, regardless of who wins? This was a district that swung a fair amount in the Democratic direction.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it was a 13-point swing toward Democrats, Micah. So, yeah, I mean, we know what we've always known, or we've known since the beginning of 2017 with special elections. These are moving toward Democrats. This doesn't change the average, which going to the election was a 16-point Democratic overperformance very much. But it does matter, just in terms of who's going to hold incumbency advantage in this seat going into
Right,
November.
So they're going to vote again in just a few months. Mm-hmm. And so in theory, whoever happens to squeak out the victory here and is the quote-unquote incumbent will have that same incumbency advantage?
It'll probably be, I'm not sure, let's say Balderson hangs on. I'm not sure he'll have the full incumbency advantage, right? He'll have had less time to build donor networks and establish name recognition and all that kind of stuff. But you'd certainly rather be the incumbent than not the incumbent, even if it's just the 3-month incumbent.
You can see Balderson being like, I need some signature legislation in the next 9
Right,
weeks
exactly.
in order to really come back.
That's a quick turnaround time. The other thing, though, is like, this might be a ridiculous question, but so after that, we live blogged this election, right? And then I wrote the wrap post for our live blog in which I included a table Nathaniel has made that I just filled in that showed this district, which had a partisan lean of R plus 14, right, had swung 13 points to the Democrats, and, let's say the Republican hangs on to win by 1. I got a lot of pushback of people saying there are no moral victories. We always get this pushback, right? It's like winning is winning, losing is losing, blah, blah, blah. You're making excuses for Democrats, which I think most of that is stupid. But is it interesting that if you look at all these special elections, a lot of them did like swing wildly towards the Democrats, but then just like stop just short of flipping.
Did Trump tweet this, or someone tweeted this? Yeah,
this is a coincidence.
That's like 8 of 9 or something. Right?
I mean, it's not a coincidence in that a lot of these seats were opened by Trump appointing Republican members of Congress from safe seats to his cabinet or to his administration. So that, the fact that these have been taking place on predominantly red turf isn't a coincidence. That said, I do think that kind of those last few points, there's more resistance to picking them up because, the National Republican Party doesn't care if Democrats overperform by 4 points. But as soon as the race gets tight, they'll start to put
pour money in.
Yeah. Right. But I mean, I mean, the moral victories thing is silly because we are going to have R plus 3 districts in November, and Democrats are going to blow right past that, most likely. And, any Republican who's hiding behind moral victories right now is going to look pretty silly.
Yeah, because the average partisan lean of the federal special elections we've had so far, I'm like eyeballing this, so this is going to be off, but it's got to be like R plus 23 or 24.
Yeah, I was going to guess 20.
And then very briefly, let's touch on the other ongoing election. This one even closer, the Republican primary for Kansas governor. Chris Kobach, the most notable name there, very Trumpian ally of Trump. This one's like 100-some votes, right, Nathaniel?
110 votes as of the weekend, yeah.
Okay. And what do we expect there? I mean...
So that one is very close. That one easily could swing. So in that race, there are 8,999 provisional ballots. Mm-hmm. But that said, we don't know how many of them are in the Democratic primary versus the Republican primary. But still, 110 vote lead is very surmountable.
And again, this is the Republican primary, so obviously we'll see what happens in the fall. But Kobach, a notable name, so if he's out, it means a big Trump ally is kind of off the national picture or off the...
For sure. I mean, it also means that Republicans have a much better chance at keeping this governorship because Kobach is a very divisive figure. He was about tied in the polls with the Democratic nominee Laura Kelly, whereas the incumbent governor Jeff Collier was up about 10 points. So Democrats are definitely rooting for Kobach here, although they probably don't want to see him get elected, so it might be a bit of a rock and a hard place type of thing.
They are very close. And this election will come down to a few ballots, but those few ballots will have the maximal impact on this race. And I mean, Kobach is a really bad candidate, and I think would make the race competitive. Collier is a kind of standard Republican, and I think would take this off the map. So I've always been fascinated by the margin of error in elections, which I think generally is sort of much bigger than people acknowledge, right? You have, even in, let's say a statewide election, you have tons of sort of volunteers counting ballots, people filling out forms, and it's like, there's just a rate of error that's natural, that's not malicious. And so once you get down to, in a statewide race, 110 votes, you're really talking about, within the margin of error. So it's sort of like, I think they should share the seat or something. I think there should be a rule. Yeah, there should be a rule that if it's within the margin of error, you share the seat.
No, that's nice. When you say margin of error, you can the Philly really comes out in you.
Really
I love
does.
it.
Wait, on which word?
Margin of error.
Margin of error.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Which word is it?
It's error.
Error.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. We're not going to talk about tomorrow's races, but there is this article going up, which will get you up to speed on that. So check the site tomorrow morning. There are a smattering of interesting races there, so you can read up on that. But we got to move on with the podcast, and we're going to talk about trends in who Democrats are nominating to run against Republican incumbents this fall. We'll do that in a sec. But first, let me tell you that today's podcast is brought to you by WordPress. WordPress powers more than 30% of all websites. That is a stunning statistic. 30% of all websites powered by WordPress, from your favorite local shops to the world's biggest companies. You can join a global high-traffic network of organizations and entrepreneurs when you build your website and your business your way on WordPress.com. WordPress allows you to carve out your own corner of the web with a new custom domain name, or you can use one that you already own and transfer your site over to WordPress. You can create a site that fits you using templates and customizable themes. There is no design experience needed. You're free to import and export content to and from your WordPress site. It is your website, your home, your content. You do what you want. WordPress will back you up. You can use a range of e-commerce options to promote and sell, from easy-to-use payment button to a full-fledged online store. WordPress makes it easy to reach a global market and let customers find you. Plus, you can get your website up and running for just $4 a month. It is time to grow your business right now. Build your website today and get 15% off any new plan purchase at WordPress.com/politics. That's WordPress.com/politics for 15% off. Once again, WordPress.com/politics. All right, we're back, and now that primary season is waning, we kind of have enough data to be able to analyze the trends in the kinds of candidates Democrats are nominating heading into the fall, and that's what we here at 538 have done. We teamed up with Ballotpedia. It's Ballotpedia? I always thought it was Ballotopedia. I thought there was an O in there.
I admit that when I go to type it, I type Ballotopedia. Yeah, I always have to correct it.
Like Stratomatic or something.
Exactly. Well, anyway, we teamed up with Ballotpedia and our new pals at ABC News to sort through all of this data. Meredith Conroy is an assistant professor of political science at California State University. She and our very own Nathaniel Rakich took the lead on this analysis, and she's joining us on the phone to talk about it. Hello, Meredith.
Hi, thanks for the invitation.
Another inaugural appearance on the podcast. This is great.
Two rookies appearing. I should also say, in addition to Nathaniel and Meredith, yes, our own Mai Wen, our quantitative editor, helped with this analysis.
Yeah. So let me just frame this, and then I want to get your thoughts, Meredith and Nathaniel, mostly since you worked on this. But as of this taping, 811 people have appeared on the ballot this year in Democratic primaries for Senate, House, and Governor. This is not counting races featuring a Democratic incumbent. And we'll talk about maybe why we decided to narrow it to that field. But, you know, what's the basic goal here? Why do we care, Meredith, about what types of candidates Democrats are nominating?
Well, the motivation for the project was to answer two questions supported with data. Essentially, you know, are Democrats shifting ideologically to the left? And is a more diverse cohort who better reflects the diversity of the Democratic constituency winning? So the sorts of candidates being nominated by Democratic primary voters is one way to answer that question. There are other ways to answer those questions, but we think that looking at who is running and winning in open primary races is a good indicator of the future of the Democratic Party.
And Nathaniel, why did we exclude incumbents? Why are we looking only at new Democrats?
You know, it kind of gives us a blank slate, right? You know, looking at open races where the Democratic Party has a chance to pick someone new who doesn't have incumbency advantage. If we were to include incumbency races, you would get a lot, you know, obviously incumbents win at an astronomically high rate, so things would be skewed toward them, which would also mean generally they would be skewed toward white men. And we were really curious to see who the party is nominating, like I said, you know, from scratch.
And so did something new jump out to you when you looked at this? Is the party moving away from white men?
Yeah, partly. The big finding, which I don't think will surprise anyone, is that women were doing really, really well. So female candidates won at a rate of 46%, whereas men won at a rate of 23%. Being a female candidate is worth an additional 10 percentage points, all else being equal on average, above being a man. So, no news there. Democrats are nominating lots of women, but that was definitely one of the two most significant findings.
Yeah, so this is something, going back a little bit to sort of what sparked this project. People all the time in the world of politics, in the world of media, and especially in the world of the political media are talking about questions of where are the parties heading, what do Democrats want, and then also, we've seen a lot of headlines about women winning primaries in the Democratic Party, right, in the year of the woman, so to speak, right? So we wanted to as is our custom here at 538, try to put a little more, granularity and put a little more, rigor behind those analyses. So I think people rightly had the sense that women were doing well. I didn't know they were doing, this well. Not only are they winning at a higher rate than men, but, controlling for other variables, Democratic voters are gravitating towards women. I mean, that shows up in the data. We didn't run this analysis for going back a bunch of years, but I sort of think if we did, that would be new. I don't think if you went to, 1992 and ran this, that you would find, women outperforming men on any of these. So this is really a striking kind of 2018 something.
Is this how you assign stories, by the way? You're just like, I don't know if you went back to 1992 and did this. Someone should do that. And then Nathaniel happens to be sitting here, and now all of a sudden he's going to have to take that on. But Meredith, did we get – so I think we did a good job of laying out the what here. Did we get any hints as to the why? Why are women doing so much better, as Micah described?
Yeah, we have a little bit of sense of that with the way we collected our data. One thing we looked at is whether or not candidates who are running have experience. And the women who are running are more likely to be experienced than the men who are running. And this was pointed out by Mai, so hat tip to her. When we were doing some of our preliminary analysis, she pointed out that the women who are running are more experienced than men. For example, especially for higher races. So, for example, for governor, 52% of the women running for governor have experience compared to 37% of the men. And then for the Senate, 80% of women have previous elected experience compared to only 22% of men. So I think it's important to point out that one of the reasons women are doing well is that they have more political experience. And I think that this indicates that women are still plagued by the qualification gap. One of the reasons women don't run to the same degree as men is they don't see themselves as qualified. And so this signals to me, as someone who is interested in candidate emergence, that women still are probably more skeptical of running for office unless they have previous experience. But it also signals that as more women jump into local politics and, city council, that we'll see more women running for higher office and winning. So I think that's important to note, that women were more experienced than men, which can explain somewhat their better success.
Yeah, Meredith, to that point, we analyzed, like Jody said, 811 candidates, and 32% of the candidates were women, but 48% of the winners were. So it goes beyond just the fact that more women are running this year. They're actually, still not nearly at parity with men in that regard.
Meredith, so to that point, could this year sort of be a necessary precondition to more lasting progress towards parity, gender parity, right? So a bunch of women are going to get elected experience this year, running for the House, running for these down.
If they win.
If they win, yes. Yeah, although I would imagine even running and winning in the nomination would probably kind of help in how you're evaluating your own preparedness for office, right?
Yeah.
So could this lead on to more progress?
So one thing I wanted to definitely discuss, because a common theme in the coverage of all the women running is that they're going to lose because they're running in races that are controlled by Republicans. But yeah, I think losing is great too, because when you run for office, you're getting that political skill, you're getting experience, and you're getting name recognition. And I think that, like you're describing, Micah, that's going to build up women in the future, even if they lose. I also think that the more salient women are in politics, even if they lose, case in point, Hillary Clinton, you're going to get more interest from women, and more women are going to look at the political environment and the political climate and the political terrain and think, I can do that. One of the reasons I think women are less likely to see themselves as qualified is that they view politics as this, combative space, which certainly it is, that requires skills that oftentimes women are less likely to possess than men, like self-promotion. That kind of thing makes them more uncomfortable than it does for men. But if they see women in those spaces, even if they lose, they'll be more likely to look at that and say, okay, I can do this. And so I do think there'll be a trickle-down effect, even if women are losing their races.
And just even anecdotally, you hear this all the time when politicians talk about their story. They talk about all the sort of early races that they lost, and they talk about the sort of clarifying moment, like 1968 or 1992 or 2010, where waves of people just got into it, whether they won or not. You sort of have this, and I wonder if we'll look back at this year as one of those moments where a bunch of people kind of dip their toe in, and it will have lasting effects.
Even if they lose, I mean, the point Meredith made about Hillary Clinton is totally right, which is to say, the year of the woman in 2018 is most often framed as a response to Trump, right? And certainly it seems like, at least in part, it is. But I also wonder to what extent it's a response to Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton ran and lost, but, was the kind of first major party nominee that wasn't a man. I mean, it seems likely that a lot of women looked at Hillary Clinton, and you see this in the reporting, and said, one, I could do that. Two, I want to prove that that women can do this, right? That just because Hillary Clinton lost doesn't mean only men should represent us.
So Meredith, you want to jump in on any of that and any other things that sort of popped out in this analysis?
The number of candidates that were running in districts, especially in districts that are more competitive, I think this just goes back to the degree to which the Democrats might be now building a bench with this enthusiasm. As I was looking at various websites, what stood out to me were those perennial candidates who run every year and lose every year. And then this year, you see those candidates towards the bottom of a list of 5 or 6 candidates. So I think that the Democratic Party should be enthused about the number of people running in those districts.
Other than the gender variable, we looked at a whole list of other variables, and people can definitely go on the website and check those out. But I did think it was interesting to look at the variables that don't seem to matter. So, for instance, being LGBTQ, being a self-funder, being a veteran, being a non-white, all of these things didn't really seem to move the needle very much. Democratic voters are splitting evenly between these different types of candidates. So it's definitely not kind of an equal opportunity, wave of this kind of anti-Trump resistance type getting swept into office.
I agree with that. That was super interesting. We didn't get a positive finding, which is to say, we did not find that being a veteran was an advantage in these primaries. We did not find that being non-white was an advantage in these primaries, or being LGBTQ or being a self-funder. That's, absence of evidence isn't evidence of whatever, which is to say,
you're only one word away.
I'm like, I should be clear with listeners. I'm pretty sick and I can't think straight.
All you needed to do was say absence.
So it's possible, it's possible that if we had, if we were omnipotent, we would know that actually being a veteran is an advantage in primaries. But it was interesting to me that the data, at the very least, was sort of muddled on the question.
Okay, I want to hit pause on this conversation very briefly. We're going to come back and talk about some of these other variables, talk some more about ideology. But first, let me tell you that today's podcast is brought to you by Casper Mattress. It's the middle of the night. You're tossing and turning. You're not sleeping. You're drenched. You're covered in sweat. It was an incredibly muggy week here in New York this past week. I think if you're listening from New York, you probably understand this phenomenon. You could run the AC or a fan all night to try and keep cool, or you could get rid of your heat-trapping mattress and sleep as cool as the other side of the pillow with a Casper mattress. All of Casper mattresses use premium foam that relieves pressure and helps align your body so you fall asleep feeling comfortable and wake up, most importantly, feeling refreshed. Thanks to the breathable material, you're guaranteed to sleep cool all summer long. And it ships for free in a box so small you won't believe that it holds a mattress, but there is a mattress inside there. When they ship it to you, you get 100 nights to try it in your own home. You can take it into your room, unfurl it, try it. If you don't love it, they'll come pick it up and refund you everything, no questions asked. Get a Casper now. Try it for free 100 nights with free shipping and returns. Go to casper.com/politics and use the code politics for $50 off. Casper.com/politics. Use the code politics. Today's podcast is also brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Hiring is challenging, but there is one place to go where you can find simple hiring that is fast and smart. It's a place where growing businesses like yours connect to qualified candidates like the ones you need. That place is ZipRecruiter.com/538. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards, but then they don't stop there. Their powerful matching technology scans thousands of resumes to actively find people with the right experience and invite them to apply to your job. That's the recruiter part in ZipRecruiter. They go out there, find a candidate for you, and then as those candidates come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one and spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a great match. ZipRecruiter is so effective that 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. Imagine that. Posting right now, you're worried, you want to find the right candidate. 1 day later, you will get a batch of quality candidates. With results like that, it's no wonder that ZipRecruiter is the highest rated hiring site in America. Right now, try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/538. That's the numbers, ZipRecruiter.com/538. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right, we're back, and let's talk about ideology. Nathaniel, did we look at all at kind of the policy positions or ideology of these Democrats who are running? Does it tell us anything at a top-line level about where the Democratic Party is today and where it's headed?
So what we did for ideology is that we used endorsements by PACs, issue groups, etc., as kind of proxies for that. So, for instance, we looked at Emily's List, which is the organization that looks to elect pro-choice Democratic women as a proxy, both kind of for women and for abortion. We looked at Moms Demand Action as a proxy for gun control. We looked at groups like Our Revolution for kind of the strain of Bernie Sanders progressive types, and we looked at groups like Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee itself as proxies for the party establishment. And we looked at the win rate of candidates who were endorsed by these different groups to kind of see which type of candidate is doing the best.
I should say the reason we did it this way is because, if you're a member of Congress, right, you have this extensive voting record. Even with that, it is difficult to measure ideology. There's like DW nominate scores, or there's like ideology scores based on who donates money to you, but it's very tricky to measure ideology, even for high-profile politicians with kind of a long paper trail, right? For a lot of these candidates, there is no paper trail, let alone one that like we could go through for hundreds and hundreds of people. So that's why we settled on using these groups and who they're endorsing, and these groups are looking at these candidates in detail as a way to sort of get at some of these fault lines in the party.
And was there some basic understanding we came to in terms of this split within the party, or which kinds of candidates are doing better?
Yeah, so by far the best success rate has been among Democratic Party establishment endorsed candidates. So, for instance, candidates that the DCCC put on their red to blue list, or that were endorsed by the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, they won almost all of their races. I think there were only 2 or 3 that were not successful. Those have been high profile for sure, and that has kind of fed this narrative of progressive revolution. But
that's like the Crowley losing to
right. Although it's important to note that we didn't include that in our analysis because Crowley was an incumbent.
Exactly.
But for instance, Kara Eastman in Nebraska defeating Brad Ashford. Yeah. So the party groups are definitely showing the kind of most muscle. Now, it's important to note that we don't know which way the causality runs. And in fact, if I were a betting man, I would say that it goes the opposite way, that the party is more likely to get behind candidates who are already the strongest candidates, who already have raised the most money, things like that. But it's still, it's telling that, the quote unquote, when progressives say that the party is, getting involved against the will of the voters to steer things in a certain direction, the voters are going along in the end. And then contrasting that, progressive groups, we kind of looked at a bit wide variety of groups that are progressive, from like Our Revolution, which is a Bernie Sanders affiliated group, to kind of older school groups like the Progressive Congressional or the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. And those progressives had a win rate just below about half. So that was actually better than I thought they would do, honestly. So there's definitely, I think, some interest in progressives, but they're clearly not doing as well as the party establishment.
Meredith, one interesting metric that caught my eye was you looked at the number of Obama alums who are running. So 5% of nominees are considered Obama alums. And I guess it kind of gets to this question we were talking about here, which is, how much... I mean, it feels like so often we talk about Sanders progressives and then establishment Democrats, and we don't really talk about like Obama Democrats. Is President Obama a presence here? Is that a coalition or a niche within the party? Is it different from other years and other kind of incumbent Democratic presidents leaving their mark on the party long term?
That's a good question about like the ideological mark. I'm not so sure. The idea for including this Obama alumni variable actually comes from Obama himself, because at a speech, I think like in March, he had said, I would create 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 young Barack Obamas or Michelle Obamas to be the next group of people who would take the baton in the relay race that is human progress. So Obama himself has said, one of his post-presidency missions is to build up a Democratic bench. So that was the motivation behind including this. And then, fortunately for us, the Obama Alumni Association website was keeping track of people who were running on Obama's coattails. And so we used that list to develop our candidates of Obama alumni. So these are people who had actually worked in his administration. So only 5% of all the candidates that we looked at are Obama alumni. So it's a small number of the total candidates, but they're doing really well. They're winning, 38% of their races. And so I think that Obama's, associating with Obama is probably helping them. One thing I found interesting as I was researching these candidates was the degree to which they talked about their experience with Obama. Some did more than others. And another thing I found interesting was the degree to which they visually communicated that their association with Obama, like some of their campaign logos associated like the Obama O.
Oh, that's
so
funny.
It was just interesting to see. Yeah.
And no matter where in your name you have an O, you're just going to make that your logo?
Well, what if you don't have an O?
Had a curve.
Oh,
there were no O's, like a C. Yeah, any curve, they would have that image. And that was super interesting to me. But the Obama alumni are doing well, but whether or not they're reflecting Obama's politics is another question. Some evidence of that I got from an article by CNN's Hunter Schwartz. He had interviewed some Obama alumni, and in those interviews, I think there were 3, all of them said, Barack Obama gave us the tools, but we're probably, going to take those and do it better. We're going to be more progressive. I believe in every instance of the individuals interviewed, they said, the Affordable Care Act is good, but we're working for something better. So in terms of, the influence of his politics, I don't know how much of that will be, found in their platform. I think that they're going to be more progressive than Obama in general.
I think that's totally right. The funny thing is you don't hear a lot of talk about the Obama wing of the Democratic Party, so to speak. And I think that's because the Obama wing is like the Democratic Party. Obama won because he was able to unite the different wings of the party. And so, he doesn't have like a wing associated with him, so to speak, in the way that Bernie Sanders does or that Hillary Clinton does.
This might actually be an interesting segment for us in the future, though, kind of like Obama legacy. I mean, certainly going into the presidential election, that'll be huge. But I don't know. I'm fascinated by this. And it feels like I don't hear people talk about it as explicitly as maybe you would expect for a 2-term, very popular, not that long ago president.
Well, it's an interesting question. It's actually, I've started to talk about this with 538 contributor Julia Azari and actually some of the people over at the Weekly Standard, because you hear all the time this question of to what extent is the Republican Party Trump's, right? And we're going to get into this a lot more. We shouldn't get into it now. But you never heard that during Obama's presidency. Like, is the Democratic Party really Obama's now? And there are a lot of reasons for that. But Obama's legacy is a slightly different question of like, in one sense, I think Obama is sort of one of the most revered people within the party. In another sense, I do think the party, as Meredith said, will push leftward from where Obama was. Although, as Nathaniel was saying, it's not like these candidates endorsed by the most progressive groups are cleaning up. They're quite the opposite. Not the opposite, but they're not cleaning up. They're doing okay.
Okay, we got to start to wrap there. Nathaniel, any final thoughts? So how are we rolling this out? There's a piece up now on the site.
There's a piece up now. There'll be a piece going up in the next 12 hours or so. But this is something we're going to return to as more primaries unfold, and we'll do more analyses. I think Meredith, you wanted to do, and I think this is a really good idea, start to look at how these variables interact with the partisan lean of the districts.
Right. Yeah, we didn't really talk about that too much just now, but I mean, we talk so often about how the best thing is to be a fit for the district, and so we can look at these larger trends, but it's really at the very local level. Any plans, Nathaniel, to do this on the Republican side?
Yes, we are hoping to do that.
Cool.
Things are getting busy, certainly with the launch of our model, but we would love to get around to that.
It took 40-some minutes for someone to mention the fact that the model is, in theory, launching very soon.
The model is launching soon, people. I know what the numbers are.
Oh, wow.
But I'm not going to tell you. Wait, can I ask one more thing? So Nathaniel and Meredith, our friends over at Ballotpedia, our friends at ABC News, spent many hours sifting through candidate websites, news reports to gather all this data, right? And for a lot of these races, you're talking about, let's say not the most polished candidates in the world. So Nathaniel and Meredith came out of it with some really funny stories about some of these candidates. So I was wondering if we could get your favorite, from each of you, your favorite kind of funny thing you found in this research.
Other than the logos that all look like Obama.
Other than the logos, yeah.
Well, I liked the candidate whose website was Clown for Congress. So no
that was
beating
going to be
around the bush there. Oh, no. I have another one. Do you want me to do my one?
Wait, clownforcongress.com?
Spelled the way you would spell it?
It's like Blue Jeans McGee or something.
Yeah,
Is his real name.
Okay, Meredith, what's your other one since you stole Nathaniel's?
Well, this one isn't very funny. I think this one's pretty clever. There was a bisexual, biracial biochemist who was campaigning on that, and I thought that was pretty clever.
That is good.
Okay, final thoughts, Nathaniel, and then we do need to wrap here.
Serious thoughts or funny thoughts?
Funny, please.
Well, I would say that my favorite was probably there is a literal clown running for Congress. Actually, there were two. There was one in South Carolina earlier this year, but that he was actually, I think, fairly I'm a clown on my day job, and now I'm running for Congress. But there was a candidate who actually ran for Congress as a clown. Her name was Blue Jeans Jenner. She was running. As the picture on her website is
wait a second,
straight up clown.
That's different than the Clown for Congress Meredith mentioned.
No, that is
I think that's the one Meredith mentioned.
Yeah.
No,
that's different.
Really?
The Clown for Congress is Steve Lau, Lough. How do you say it, Meredith?
Oh yeah, Lau. You're right.
He's a clown during the day, or
his slogan is. His slogan is "We go high, vote low." So I think it's
so
low.
Maybe Steve Lowe, which originally I thought the Clown for Congress. I'm just looking at this now.
Yeah.
I thought it was a play on his last name, Lough. Is spelled kind of like laugh. But here's what he says. But that's not it. My name is Steve, let's say Lowe, and I'm running for Congress in South Carolina's 5th District. Yes, I am a clown, a real professional clown, an ex-Ringling Brothers, blah, 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 blah.
Okay. Listeners, this is your assignment. Now, please tell us definitively how many clowns are running for Congress. We have to wrap here. Meredith.
And the joke is too obvious. Don't make 435.
Yeah,
we want actual clowns.
Meredith Conroy, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Nathaniel Rakich, Better Nate, thank you.
Thank you. This was awesome.
And Micah Cohen, thanks to you.
Better Micah.
Yeah, the best Micah. My name is Jody Evergan. Galen Druk is our producer. Tony Chow is in the control room. You can get in touch by emailing us, podcasts@538.com. Of course, you can tweet at any of us if you have any questions or comments or clown-related material for us to look at. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.